Boom! We are live, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. It is, of course, your boy, Nolan Hawkeye Anthony here. And I thank all of you for being here. Yes, including Iowa State fans, wherever you may be and however you may be listening. It is, of course, CyHawk week, y'all. And this is a big game for a lot of folks, particularly on the Iowa State side. In-state rivalry, a lot of emotion, a lot of energy involved with this game. And I am going to be diving into it all. Going to be looking at some of the PFF grades for both Iowa State and Iowa players. Look at the available stats between Iowa State and Iowa and provide a prediction at the end of this video. Now, forewarning here, I am an Iowa Hawkeye fan, number one, and number two, the PFF grades are not, and stats in general are, it's only been one game. And so therefore it is difficult to go all in on this stat or this stat, but nonetheless, I think it's important to look at and just take it in as a resource rather than the end all be all. But before we get into any of that, I want to ask you guys to consider hitting that subscribe button, help your boy out. We did cross the threshold of 1,000 subs, and I thank all of you guys for helping me out. At the very least, like, comment, share. If you want to donate to the channel, you guys can hit the donate link on the YouTube channel and just go from there. Everything counts. Your boy has a coffee habit, as you know. And without further ado, let's get into this. So let's start with Iowa and their week one performance against South Dakota State. There are many different takes out there. I would say by and large, the media looked at Iowa's victory over South Dakota State as underwhelming, especially on the offensive side. The defensive side was stellar as per usual. The defensive side is elite. The special teams looked pretty good. Iowa did have one missed field goal, but that may have been in part to the snapper and the holder rather than the kicker, Aaron Blum. But overall, there was just a general sense of being underwhelmed with the Iowa Hawkeye performance. I've seen some people who have said, well, Kirk Ferentz knows what he's doing. It was week one. He didn't want to show all of his offensive firepower and play calling and this and that. And to me, it's like, well, guys, we have heard that excuse before. And the general play-by-play after Iowa has a terrible, terrible offensive performance. By the way, if you weren't aware, Iowa's defense scored more than Iowa's offense against South Dakota State, an FCS team. But the general progression is bad offensive performance. Fans share their opinions, and by the way, fans really only just want Iowa to be slightly better than where they're at offensively right now. That's all they want. It's not like, by and large, Iowa fans are not asking for Iowa to be a top 10 offensive team or top 25 offensive team, just average, mediocre. So it goes bad offensive performance, fans get upset. Then you have former players, shaming Iowa fans for having an opinion. And then you have the Iowa media finger wagging at the fans, saying, well, they're just kids. You shouldn't be so hard on the kids. And that's how it goes. We have seen that rodeo play itself out before many, many times with the Iowa Hawkeyes after a bad offensive performance. I do think Arland Bruce looked okay at wide receiver. He had some moments there. And I think LaShawn Williams looked okay as well. The last thing, it was also good to see Logan Jones, the former defensive lineman, switch to center. go in there, and I think he performed really well for a first game at center. I do. Caleb Johnson got some snaps, which is really good, because anytime you have a really, really talented guy, this is what Kentucky does in basketball, Duke does in basketball. Anytime you can have a really, really, really talented young guy see some snaps, it only propels the ceiling of your team and how far you guys can go as a team. Because that one guy, one or two, one or a couple guys have such a high talent level or possibility that if you can get them started early, they can help raise and propel your team when initially you didn't even necessarily think that they would contribute to your team. So it was good to see Caleb Johnson. Those would be the positives for the Iowa offense. Conversely, the Iowa defense looked great as per usual. They were flying around, getting pressure on the quarterback, got 2 safeties. Terry Roberts looked good. Riley Moss looked good. Jack Campbell, 6'5", monster, looked good. Iowa was excellent on defense. Special teams, Torrey Taylor looked good. Arlen Bruce did a decent job in the punt game. Riley Moss did okay in the return game. Aaron Blom went 1 of 2, hit one really nice field goal. The other one missed barely, but he did get a hold of it well. I think it was a bad snap and hold. So those are all of the positives for the Iowa Hawkeyes after week 1. For Iowa State, they looked good all the way around. They beat Southeast Missouri State. I would argue that South Dakota State is a better team substantially than Southeast Missouri State, but nonetheless, you can only play the team that is on your schedule, and they shellacked them 42-10. The offense looked good. The defense looked good. They held Southeast Missouri State to 10 points. Hunter Deckers looked great in his first, well, I'm not sure if it was his first start, but the first start of this season, he looked great, as this is now his team. They showed that potentially they have a legit number 1 receiver in Xavier Hutchinson. Jarrell Brock looked good, the former 4-star who way back when, before Iowa took Tyler Goodson, was thought he was going to be going to Iowa, but of course Iowa took Tyler Goodson, and so Jarrell Brock is now a Cyclone. Like so many Cyclones. Nonetheless, he looked good with 104 yards rushing. Defense looked fine. Colby Reeder was flying all over the field, 5 tackles. Eli Sanders had 24 yards. Cartavius, the true freshman Norton, had 3 carries for 21 yards. So Iowa State slam dunked their first game of the season. They absolutely did what they were supposed to do, and they looked great. Here's some other stats here. Jace Gilbert, place kicker, was 6 for 6 on the extra points, trying to see if he made any field goals. No field goals attempted. Here's the defense here. A lot of guys flying all over the place. Orion Vance, 3 tackles. As I already stated, Colby Reeder did well. So this is Iowa State, okay? Now, these are the stats. We can take a look at Iowa stats here before we go even further. Spencer Petras went 11 of 25 against South Dakota State for 109 yards, 44% completion percentage, average of a 4.4 yards per completion, 0 tubs to 1 INT. And quite frankly, he probably could have had 2 or 3 passes picked off. I hate to say it, but he probably could have had 2 or 3 passes picked off. Okay. LaShawn Williams had 72 yards, but there wasn't a ton of wiggle room for him. The offensive line looked awful for the Iowa Hawkeyes. It looked terrible. Okay. As I said already, it was good to see Arland Bruce. It was good to see LaShawn Williams get some wiggle. And I do also want to say this, okay? In fairness to Iowa, their B offense was out there against South Dakota State. They were missing Gavin Williams, their starting running back. They were missing their top wide receiver in Keegan Johnson. Backup wide receiver Deontay Vines, who most certainly is going to contribute to this Iowa Hawkeye team. Iowa was missing Nico Reganey, another starting wide receiver. Iowa was down 3 offensive starters against South Dakota State. Now, I'm not going to say that to give a huge excuse to the Iowa Hawkeyes, because in the end, they still should have put more points on the board than they did this past weekend. But fair is fair, and I would be remiss if I did not point out that those 3 starters were out against South Dakota State. Here is Iowa State's depth chart. Now, this is not the newest one that is released, but this is their depth chart nonetheless. This is who, by and large, they will be rolling with ahead of week 2 against the Iowa Hawkeyes. This is their defense here. Some speed, no doubt, for the Iowa State Cyclones on the defensive side of the ball and the offensive side of the ball, quite frankly. They definitely got some speed. Here in the Iowa Hawkeyes depth chart, Keegan Johnson was out. As you guys can see here, he was listed as a starter. He was out. I think he did see a few snaps, but by and large, he was not really able to play. I feel good that he will be ready to go against Iowa State. Here's all the other guys. I think we're going to see a shuffle up on the offensive line, because last week the offensive line just did not get it done. Iowa will try and find their 5 best offensive linemen to put on the field against Iowa State. Arland Bruce looked way better, and I think he looked good considering South Dakota State was pretty focused on him and knew that he was their only option at wide receiver, basically. So considering that, and considering Iowa really didn't have a deep threat as Keegan Johnson was out and other wide receivers, Deontay Vines, were out, I think considering Arland Bruce had a decent game. Gavin Williams, LaShawn Williams there. You guys can see on the defensive side of the ball there. I think Quinn Schultz played a hell of a game against South Dakota State. He looked really, really good. Cooper DeJean looked great. Hopefully Justin Jacobs is good to go. But in my opinion, that's not the biggest concern for the Iowa Hawkeyes ahead of Iowa State when you're talking about players that may be out, may not be out. The defensive line was great. Lucas Van Ness, Noah Shannon, John Wagner, Ethan Herkett, all of them. I mean, Iowa's defensive line is legitimately 10 deep. All the guys that you see here, 2, 4, 6, 8 guys you see here, all saw significant snaps against South Dakota State and will see significant snaps against Iowa State as well. So here are the PFF grades. Not all of them. PFF does not have, they have the grades for the game that Iowa State and Iowa had, but it's a little hard to, you know what? Actually, I'm going to pause this here. So I'm going to show a few grades here. I don't think PFF at the time of recording this has all the grades, and they don't have the rankings updated. Some of the stats are still there from 2021. As you guys can see here, Spencer Petras' grade against South Dakota State was a measly 33.1. Guys, that is significantly below average. Whereas if we take a look at Hunter Decker's, he was an 82.5. And here's the sad reality. And I don't hate to say it, it's just the reality. You would not have guessed that Spencer Petras was a 3rd-year starting quarterback for the Iowa Hawkeyes against South Dakota State. You would not have guessed that this past week. Here is the top wide receiver for the Iowa Hawkeyes, Arland Bruce. He had a decently graded game at 75.9. That's not bad. He contributed in the run game, contributed in the passing game. Here is Xavier Hutchinson, 75.8. So actually, Arlen Bruce had a higher grade according to PFF than Xavier Hutchinson. Uh, you know, regardless though, Xavier Hutchinson obviously had a good game against Southeast Missouri State or whoever Iowa State played against. So those are the top grades for the wide receiver. I'm going to do a couple more here, and then we will move on. Here is Iowa's running back, LaShawn Williams. He had a grade of a 58.8, so not great. Obviously not great. And we transition here to Jarrell Brock. He had a 72.1, excellent. Well, not excellent, but above average grade. He did really well for the Cyclones this past week as well. And I think that this is definitely a matchup to watch. I think Gavin Williams and Jarrell Brock, obviously I just looked at LaShawn Williams. I think Gavin and Jarrell are similar types of runners. Downhill, put their shoulder down. They have some breakaway speed, but real bruisers. In the last position, I'm going to pull up here just because it's going to take too long. And it's not, on purpose, because I know some people in the comment section are going to be like, well, you didn't show this position. You didn't show this position because, well, Iowa State or whoever Iowa seems to be playing, they have a really, really good player there. I promise you, I am not that diabolical. I'm really not. Sam Laporta had a grade of a 48.9, terrible grade. He did not look good against South Dakota State. Many reasons for that. I was surprised that we did not see very much Steven Stelianos, the transfer from Louisiana Lafayette. I was surprised by that. Maybe we'll see him moving forward because Iowa can use every option they can get. Here is Easton Dean's grade, 57.8, so not great either. Both Iowa and Iowa State's tight ends have some work to do next week against each other. All right, guys, here we go. We got the matchup predictor. ESPN Power Index has never liked Iowa very much compared to other grading systems, other predictors, machines, whatever you want to call it. They give Iowa State a 58.7% chance of beating the Iowa Hawkeyes. Iowa, therefore, has a 41.3% chance of beating Iowa State. Let's see if there is a money line. Iowa, according to Vegas, is a 3.5-point favorite against Iowa State. The over and under is 41.5. I like that a lot. This game is usually close, guys. It is. Here is the bottom line. And I'm going to scroll this. You guys can see the team stats here, just night and day. Here's the bottom line, folks. Iowa has never been known for their offense, okay? And regardless of how bad their offense was last week, as long as they have a defense like what we saw from them against South Dakota State, Iowa will always have a shot of beating whoever they have to play against in the coming week. That's the reality. When you have a defense that good, you will always be in ball games, okay? Now, for me, when I look at the Iowa offense, I think to myself, but unfortunately, I thought this same thing going into week one, and I was wrong then. But I think, well, can it offensively, it can't get much worse, can it? Right? Can't get much worse. But of course, week one against South Dakota State, it did get worse when I thought it could not get any worse. Okay. I do think that Iowa will get some of their guys back that they had out, whether it's all of them, whether it's one or two, we'll see. I don't think we're going to see Deontay Vines. I don't think we're going to see Nico Reganey. I think the two guys that Iowa that we can possibly expect to be back will be Keegan Johnson and Gavin Williams. Maybe some other guys in the peripherals. But the bottom line is, again, Iowa has that excellent defense. And I've said since day one that Iowa has an elite defense going into this season. Elite. They have NFL guys littered all over that defense. They have an excellent punter in Torrey Taylor. This is the same old Iowa team that won 10 games last year. This is Iowa football. So I don't, what I'm getting at is I don't want to overreact to a poor week 1 performance when we've seen this before from Iowa many, many times. Many, many times. I mean, how often has Iowa laid a stinker and then the next week they totally blast whatever team they're playing? So again, as long as you have a defense and you're disciplined and all of that, you're in good shape. Iowa State. I think Iowa State is probably better than some predicted. I don't think they're a top 25 caliber team. I don't think they're as talented as Iowa top to bottom, but I do think that they are better in some spots. Quarterback, I think they are probably better at this point. Man, that's a sad statement. A first-year starting guy is better than a guy starting in his 3rd year. You would think, but by just having played all those games, that you would finally be better, or a little bit improved. They're probably better at quarterback. They're probably better at wide receiver, but that's been the case the last 6 times Iowa has played Iowa State. But as far Iowa State might be better at running back, but if I just look at running back in a vacuum, the talent of just the running backs, not the offensive line, the running backs, I would say it's probably a wash at the running back position. It's probably about even. I think Gavin Williams and LaShawn Williams are talented. I think Jarrell Brock is talented. I think Iowa probably has a more healthy room, has more options. As for the offensive line, probably a wash as well. And, I would always lean Iowa over most teams because Iowa, their bread and butter is the offensive line. Iowa has the edge defensively over Iowa State, but it's not like any of these positions. It's head and shoulders above. So Iowa State is better at quarterback, wide receiver, and I would say Iowa is better at every other position. Maybe Iowa State is better in the punt or kick return. I'd say that that's probably a wash too. But as far as the punter, Iowa's got a legit punter in Torrey Taylor. So that's that. But Iowa State is better, in my opinion, than anticipated or the outside anticipated going into this season. And I think a lot of how Iowa State does this year will depend on the development of Hunter Deckers and Jarrell Brock. Can they be much further along than most people anticipated? Another key factor in this game is that it is at Kinnick Stadium. That is a huge thing. Iowa State fans, we both know that it is dang difficult for any team, let alone Iowa State, to beat Iowa at Kinnick Stadium. It is very difficult, very difficult. Iowa fans are going to be ready to go. Iowa will be ready to go. I think there's motivation for Iowa to win their 7th straight game against Iowa State. But there's also motivation from Iowa State to end the winning streak that Iowa has over them. And I think Matt Campbell wants to get that chip off of his shoulder. But it may be one of those things where Matt Campbell and the coaching staff, because they haven't beat Iowa, where they get kind of tight, especially if they have a lead and they can see the win. But let me tell you guys something. As a former Division I water polo player, there is such a thing as, if you haven't done it, it's hard to see how you're going to do it. In other words, it's hard to see how you're going to beat a team when you haven't beaten them for like 6 years in a row. And it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Now, I don't want to get too far into all that foo-foo nonsense, but basically what I'm saying is you need to see how you need to see the actual victory in order in the back of your mind for you to say, you know what, we can beat them. Either way, this is going to be a fun game. I'm excited about it. Iowa must improve offensively. The murmurs are getting louder and louder and louder. I don't think if Brian Ferentz continues how he is going so far, I do not see how he comes back as Iowa's offensive coordinator. So he needs to get this going. He needs to get Iowa on track. And again, to me, folks, Brian Ferentz in his early tenure was decent. The offense was decent. People forget that Iowa had a top 30, or excuse me, top 50 average scored points team just 3 years ago. Just 3 years ago. So that actually makes where Iowa's offense is now even worse because they've regressed. And it's like, even if they find a way to progress, will it be past what they were a couple of years ago when he first started? Because if it's not, then you still haven't progressed that much. So that is a big deal. All right, guys, my prediction for this game, I think Iowa's defense will come ready to go. I think that Hunter Dekkers in his probably his first, maybe not his first true road game, but his first true road game against Iowa at the very least, will throw 1 or 2 picks against the Iowa Hawkeyes. I think Iowa State will be able to throw the ball a little bit, maybe run the ball a little bit, but Iowa's defense will be ready to go. They're going to get a couple takeaways. Torrey Taylor is going to have a great punting game. Aaron Blom is going to knock in some field goals. I think Iowa's ground game improves. I think Iowa hits on 1 or 2 deep plays with Keegan Johnson back, and the passing game is slightly improved. So I'm going to take the Iowa Hawkeyes in this game 25-20. I'm taking the Iowa Hawkeyes 25-20 in this game. Yet another slow scoring game. And the Iowa Hawkeyes win their 7th in the CyHawk series. As an aside here, last time I did this at the beginning of the video, I'm going to do this at the end of this video. I think the CyHawk game should be played every other year, especially as an Iowa fan. I think it should be played every other year as a way for both teams to be able to play other teams, other strong opponents. Because when Iowa State has Iowa on their schedule, or Iowa has Iowa State on their schedule, that pretty much takes care of the one tough out-of-conference game. I would like, as an Iowa fan, I would like to see them play some other teams. So I would do it every other year. I would play the CyHawk game every other year. All right, guys, this is what it's all about. I can't wait to see you guys. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section. What is going to be the score? Do you think Iowa will finally be healthy or relatively healthy going into this game? What do you think the mentality is going to be for Iowa State since they haven't beat the Hawkeyes in 6 years? Iowa State fans, please try and be civil with us Iowa fans, myself included. But I know y'all are going to get in the comment section. It's all good. I appreciate all of you for being here. You guys know that. Be sure to hit the subscribe button, like, comment, share. You know the drill. And last but not least, DBAP, don't be a pussy willow. Facts or feelings, because your feelings just don't matter. Love you guys. See you guys next time. Go Hawks.